Security in the spotlight again in Kenya after al-Shabab fighters attack a hotel complex in Nairobi. Can these assaults be prevented? And what's the message the armed group is trying to send? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Dareen Abughaida. Al-Shabab has long threatened Kenya's security with attacks targeting civilians and members of its military. Its latest assault is raising questions about the country's ability to keep people safe. Dozens of people were killed on Tuesday when 5 gunmen attacked a hotel complex in Nairobi. The armed group has been fighting Kenyan and regional African troops in its home base of Somalia. We'll bring in our guests in a moment, but first, this update from Mohammed Ado in Nairobi.
Details are now getting clearer about the attack that was carried here in this complex behind me, 14 Riverside Drive, by al-Shabab fighters last Tuesday. Police now confirmed there were 5 attackers and that it took them up to 10 months to plan the whole operation. The attackers were said to be frequent visitors to the compound, having meals in restaurants inside and also having coffee there while they planned to see how they will be carrying out the attack. And in a departure from past attacks like the one that happened here, Kenyans are paying accolades to their security forces for the whole rescue operation and how it was carried out. The number of people who were rescued was far greater than past attacks such as the one that happened here, but also how swift they were in not only reacting but also ending the whole operation. Al-Shabab is saying that they carried out the attack here because it was in retaliation for Donald Trump's declaration of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, something many people here are not buying, saying that it would have been more plausible to say that it was in retaliation for attacks against them by not only U.S. forces but also Somali special forces trained by the United States and also being given logistical and air support by the U.S. military. Of course, the group is at pains to prove to the world at a moment that they are on the receiving end and losing ground very fast in Somalia, that they are still a force to reckon with. And such attacks would come in really handy for them to prove that they are still around and can still attack and carry out as much damage as possible. Mohammed Ado for Inside Story, Nairobi.
Let's take a closer look at al-Shabab, which was formed in 2006 after a brief civil war in Somalia. It took control of vast areas in 2009, including the capital Mogadishu and major ports. In 2011, an offensive by 22,000 Ethiopian and African Union troops pushed out al-Shabab fighters from Mogadishu. And a year later, military action forced the armed group to leave the vital port city of Kismayo. But by 2018, al-Shabab had lost substantial territory, yet it still poses a security threat. Now, al-Shabab says it targets Kenya for sending troops into Somalia in 2012. That was in response to a series of abductions of Western tourists and aid workers in parts of Kenya near the Somali border. In 2013, al-Shabab attacked the Westgate Mall in Nairobi. 67 people were killed. 2 years later, 148 people died in an al-Shabab attack at a university in Garissa in eastern Kenya. And in 2016, the armed group struck a Kenyan military base in Somalia, killing at least 100 soldiers. Let's bring in our panel. In Nairobi, we have security analyst Mustafa Yusuf Ali. In Oslo, we have Stig Jarle Hansen. He's the author of the forthcoming book, Horn, Sahel and Rift, Fault Lines of the African Jihad. Also in Nairobi is Nerima Wako Ojiwa. She's a political analyst. She's also the executive director of Siasa Place. That's an NGO that works to encourage women and young people to participate in politics. Good to have you with us on Inside Story. Thanks for joining us. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, it's now being reported that some of the attackers were in fact Kenyans. What does that say about al-Shabab in Kenya and their operations and their ability to strike this way?
Well, first of all, these of course, not homegrown terrorists. These are terrorists that were recruited by al-Shabab, which is a group operating in Somalia. What al-Shabab has been doing has been recruiting from among Kenyans, Tanzanians, Ethiopians, British, from the United States of America, and many other nationalities to fight in their horrible cause in Somalia. Well, and it's not the first time that they've tried to recruit Kenyans to fight for their cause.
Stig, Jarle, Hansen, you're nodding along. Talk to us about this recruitment and how concerning it is.
No, I was nodding because these type of operations, also Westgate, they're in general planned in Somalia and staffed by people trained inside of Somalia. But as the previous speaker said, Shabab has been highly successful in the past in recruiting Kenyans, Tanzanians, and indeed Norwegian citizens. One of the attackers from in the Westgate was actually a Norwegian citizen. So they have been quite successful in recruiting outside of Kenya, especially outside of Somalia, especially in Kenya. But I suspect these people to be, as in the past, trained in Somalia, a part of the core organization of the Shabab, and this mission must have been planned for quite a while.
And what is it that makes them so successful at this recruitment?
I think there's a lot of things inside Kenya that creates fertile grounds for recruitment. It is poverty, it is youth unemployment. In addition to that, you have a distrust between youths and the police. All of these things have to be worked with. But I also have to say that there has been a lot of progress on the Kenyan side in doing counterterrorism and also these softer sides of de-radicalization and countering violent extremism. A lot of it is handled by the civil society, but there has been progress inside Kenya in curtailing these efforts by the Shabab and dismantling the Kenyan networks.
Nerima, according to reports by Western and regional security officials, intelligence services in Kenya were in fact warned back in Christmas that al-Shabab was planning some sort of attack in the country on high-profile targets. And these reports also seem to say that the intelligence officials were frustrated that they hadn't gotten a greater response from Kenyan authorities. Do you think this attack should have been preempted by security forces in Kenya?
I think that we have to understand the kind of situation that we're in, because when we talk about terror attacks in Kenya, they happen quite frequently, and for a country within this region, we're the ones who are attacked quite the most. So when we talk about warnings, we are always receiving warnings. There's always high alerts. I also remember when we were having our holidays and people were traveling, they were being warned about terror attacks, not just in Nairobi, but we're also talking about malls and also offices and things like that. So when you hear people crying wolf or setting alarms often, of course, people will not take that as seriously. So it's unfortunate that that did happen. But I do have to say, with the way the security forces handled the situation this time around on Tuesday, we can see quite an improvement as compared to what happened in 2013 with Westgate.
Well, yes, we do hear, Nerima, that security forces were in fact on the scene in the hour of when this attack was taking place, but it does still beg the question about the effectiveness of the security apparatus in Kenya, seeing that al-Shabab was able to carry out such an attack and kill a number of people.
That is true, because even when we look at, when we drive around Nairobi, for instance, a lot of the lights have security cameras. We're constantly being told to be aware. You cannot enter a mall or any public building without first verifying your identification. There are metal detectors. We have security guards who pat us down. So people are aware that the situation is tense. People are aware that we do need high security within the country. But it is unfortunate when we talk about, I've had the previous panelists talk about the high unemployment rate and the high number of young people. What we're seeing is young people being ostracized. We're seeing that they're trying to find a grouping, whether it's extremist groups or whatever, to feel that they fit in, to feel that they are part of a community and they can contribute to that. So the government not only needs to look at security and securing the country, it also needs to look at its young people. What is the government doing to make this workplace environment conducive for them. So when we do see instances of recruitment, when we talk about recruitment of extremist groups, such cases are reported. Although they have started having initiatives, we've had Linda Inchi and things of that sort, they haven't quite grown when we talk about people reporting incidences of neighbors acting suspicious and things like that. So those are some of the conversations that we need to have, not fully relying on our security agencies only.
Mustafa, after the Westgate assault, of course, that took place in 2013, Kenyan security forces really cracked down, some would say indiscriminately, on Muslims and as well as ethnic Somalis on the premise that many of them might be al-Shabab members, and that in turn sowed anger among the community, which some say leads to recruitment. Is there a risk that the same thing happens now after this attack, considering that the president has come out and spoken, but he also did say that he's going to go after, in other words, everybody who carried out this attack?
Yeah, first of all, before answering the question on recruitment, which we need to be careful, what actually what causes terrorism and hate and recruitment. If we compare with 2013, the way the security agencies and forces responded to this particular attack in Dusit, a D2 hotel, they were efficient, swift, and they overwhelmed the terrorists within minutes. The terrorists were put on the defense mode, meaning that they were unable to immediately carry on the offensive and achieve the lethality that they had hoped for. Now, this comes as a result of the reforms that have taken place, have been carried out within the security sector in the country itself, that they, with proper coordination, a better coordination this time, and within a very short time, they were able to contain the situation, pin down the terrorists to a corner, and then rescue over 700 Kenyans. Talking about the
government
polls
response
for recruitment now,
yeah.
Compared today in 2013, when you had these groups controlling the narratives, they kind of were controlling the ideology, the robust ideological pushback engagements and programs and interventions that Kenyans have put in place have made sure that these guys no longer control the narrative. Their ideology is started. The fact that al-Shabab today can actually say that they carried out the attack because of a laughable reason that United States of America has shifted its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem tells you that this is a group on its back foot, is not coordinated, and that its leadership has been decapitated. And this is to a large extent as a result of the security agencies on one side and the communities in Kenya working together to address the challenge of terrorism. Of course, recruitment will always take place. It happens in the United States of America, in Britain, in Norway. There will always be these bad apples that will be recruited to do these kinds of
Stig, I'll come over to you in a second because I see you want to jump in. But Mustafa Ali, on one more point, you're saying that they are on the back foot, but here's the assessment by the International Crisis Group. They're saying that al-Shabab has proven as resilient across parts of East Africa as in Somalia itself, adapting when under pressure by relocating its operations and reorienting its recruitment. You don't agree?
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that for a terrorist group to remain relevant and to prove its resilience, they simply need to carry out an attack in a year or an attack after every 2 years for them to stage a comeback. And this is typical of any terrorist organization. Al-Shabaab has been active inside Somalia, has been active on the fringes of the Kenyan borders in Mandera, in Wajir, but it has never carried out a major terrorist, or rather it has never staged a major terrorist attack in the capital city of Nairobi since 2013 when they attacked Westgate.
Okay.
Well, they have been trying to attack Kenya, but most of their plans have been thwarted by security agencies, meaning that they are unable to penetrate the country as they used to before.
All right. Stig, please go ahead, because I see you want to jump in. And also tell us, why does al-Shabab attack Kenya in particular?
No, I just need to also comment upon the previous speaker, because I agree with him that the Shabab has been weakened inside of Kenya, but the predictions of al-Shabab's death is very premature, and they're stable and able inside Somalia. For the 2 last years, they've been slightly growing, in fact, I would say, in their influence inside Somalia, and that's the big dilemma of Kenya. This has to be solved through efforts inside of Somalia also. It's outside of Kenya where these attacks are actually planned and staged into Kenya. So Kenya has done a lot inside their own country, and they are not safe yet, but there has been progress. But when you have this thing going on inside Somalia, then there's bound to be several attacks in the future, and some of them might just slip through. That happens quite easily. And in fact, some of the Kenyan success is some of the causes for the Shabab attacking. We saw now that the Shabab had one statement blaming the United States and the fact that they recognize Jerusalem as the headquarters of the capital city of Israel. But at the same time, Shabab local is situated and distributed several videos talking about Kenya and the Kenyan intervention, because the Kenyan intervention was crucial in the defeats that the Shabab, after all, suffered in the period 2011 until 2015, where it kind of stabilized itself. Basically, the offensive against Kismayo, the Kenyan intervention. Kenya has been very important inside Somalia in countering Shabab influence. But as I say, no, Shabab is stable. And I don't say that this is the death throes of a destabilized organization. I don't believe that.
Okay, and Nerima, al-Shabab, however, was active in Kenya even before its intervention in Somalia. But to what extent have al-Shabab's activities escalated, in your opinion, since Kenya's intervention in Somalia?
I think that it does play a role, because when we think about the attack that happened in El Ade in 2016, and even after what happened on Tuesday, a lot of people are asking questions as to why are we still in Somalia? Do we still need to be in Somalia? Because in 2016, they had said the reason for the attacks was because of our forces, our security forces being in Somalia. There have also been particular cases of where people feel insecure, those who are living close to the border. And we cannot forget that when they put a security crackdown within the city, a lot of Somali Kenyans were put into Kasarani, a stadium, and treated like prisoners, and they didn't have access to their basic rights. So it created a lot of anger and animosity. And also in areas within our city where we can talk about Isli, which is an urbanized slum area that's not far from Nairobi, which is the CBD. A lot of citizens who are Kenyan but of Somali descent do not feel like they belong in the country. So as much as we talk about internal al-Shabab uprising, we do have to recognize that there are people within our country who are Kenyan, but they do not even feel Kenyan as citizens, and that in itself can give them motivation to join extremist groups, and that in itself can fuel such things. And just because they are linked to Somali descent, a lot of Kenyans feel that perhaps it's about time our government starts to begin to talk about exiting Somalia, if in that case has anything to do with the attacks that happened on Tuesday.
How likely is that, Nerima, considering as well that the opposition leader in Kenya, Raila Odinga, has in the past called for troops to be withdrawn? And last year as well, there was a lawmaker that petitioned the National Assembly demanding the same. So do you think that Kenyan authorities now are going to be weighing the price that they're willing to pay in light of such attacks in terms of achieving what their objectives are in Somalia?
I do not think it's very likely, but I do want to be optimistic, because we are talking about the security of our country. We also have to recognize that we do have a cabinet secretary, Matiang'i, who is known for being a man of action, known for being a man who decides to take things into his own hands. So it is something that we can also put up to the forefront and put it on the table. It's something that can be discussed, especially as we talk about the sort of attacks that we're receiving. Should we be doing the things that we've been doing? Because at the same time, is it working for the Kenyan people? And if it's not, what sort of choices do we have to make sure that we change the direction that we're taking for the safety of the Kenyan people?
Mustafa, the African Union mission has recently said that it does aim to eventually exit from Somalia. How likely is it that Somalian forces will actually be able to maintain security without AMISOM's support?
Yeah, at this point, and even in the next 1 year, it's highly unlikely that the Somali National Army will be able to contain al-Shabab on their own. The people, the Somalis, the government of Somalia will need this multinational force to continue to support the Somali National Army, to stabilize some of the cities, to train the police, the security agencies, they're on the Somali National Army until they are ready to be able to take on al-Shabab, fully contain it. Without that, I don't see that the Somali National Army and the Somalis being able to actually contain al-Shabab on their own in the next 6 months or 1 year or even 2 years. So we are in this for the long haul, I think.
Stig, if the Kenyans withdrew from Somalia, hypothetically speaking here, would that then remove one of the main reasons why al-Shabab targets Kenya?
I agree with the people who say that the Kenyan intervention prompted a lot of attention from the Shabab, but a withdrawal, no, I don't think will solve any problems, because as the previous speaker said, the Somali army is not ready to take charge. And as I said previously, these attacks in the past have been planned inside Somalia, and they've been staged by core members of the group trained inside Somalia. So Somalia is a major problem for Kenya and the Shabab presence. Unfortunately, I also think that there's something wrong with the strategy inside Somalia. Firstly, you have to provide some kind of security and safety in the countryside. What happened now is that the Shabab has been able to operate relatively freely in the countryside in supposedly liberated areas. So they can harness support from the local population or force the local population into supporting them.
But they have suffered setbacks in Somalia, haven't they, Stig? They have suffered setbacks in Somalia. They have been weakened.
Have suffered. They suffered setbacks in the period from 2011 until 2015. After 2015, they didn't have that much of setbacks. They stabilized. If you look at the attacks, for example, in Mogadishu, it's stable, slightly growing. So for the last years, this is a stable organization. It's not an organization on the verge of collapse.
But what do you put that down to?
Shabab has been predicted to collapse many times for the last 18 years.
Mustafa Ali, you're shaking your head. You don't agree.
Al-Shabab has been reduced to a criminal gang that extorts Somalia. Al-Shabab has been reduced to a level whereby they are just basically competing with ISIS in certain parts of Somalia to tax Somalis, the illegal tax. And the Somalis are paying this tax because if they don't pay, they are threatened and they are killed by al-Shabaab.
Just jump in because we're running out of time. Stig, go ahead.
It is true.
Stig, final thoughts from you?
No, it is
Apologies,
true.
Mustafa Ali, we're running out of time. Stig, final thoughts from you?
It is true that al-Shabaab...
I think you can just look at that. You just look at attack rates in Mogadishu to prove that that is wrong. You can just look at the time they managed to hold the territories in Middle Juba. These organizations have suffered setbacks from 2011 to 2015. Now they're stable and they're not going to be defeated. And they're quite powerful in numbers compared to, for example, other al-Qaeda affiliated organizations. So I don't think we will see them disappearing. This is not death trunks. I do think Kenya has improved, but I think the solution is actually inside Somalia.
One final question, Stig. What kind of numbers are you talking about? What you mentioned numbers. What kind of numbers are you talking about? Estimates put them at between 7,000 to 9,000. Is that correct?
I would put the estimate slightly lower, between 5,000 and 7,000, but still very powerful, still able to attack inside of Mogadishu, still able to hold territories, and still able, as we saw today, to hit Kenya in Nairobi.
All right. On that note, we'll have to leave it there. We've come to the end of the show. I thank you very much for joining us. Mustafa Yusuf Ali from Nairobi, Stig, Jarle, Hansen from Oslo, and Nerima Wako Ojiwa from Nairobi as well. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From myself, the whole team here in Doha. Bye-bye for now.